The final boss in Shadow of the Erdtree is quite possibly one of the hardest that From Software has ever made. And where we've been covering a bunch of builds since the DLC's release, I still get asked as to what is the best build to use for Promised Consort Radahn. So today, I'm going to show you the 3 best builds that you can use to absolutely annihilate him, and all of these builds work all the way up to NG+7. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump straight into the first build. Now, I am going to be doing this video a little bit differently because I'm basically just going to be showcasing the same fight over and over again, just with 3 different builds. So I will run through the builds with you guys whilst the respective Radahn fight happens with the respective build. But of course, first of all, the one build that has always decimated Elden Ring even from the very beginning is going to be our infamous Winged Assassin build, which utilizes 2 twin blades, in this case being 2 gargoyle twin blades, with seppuku on a blood affinity to absolutely rinse through any enemy's health bar, as you will be constantly proccing bleed, and as you'll be seeing in a moment, will defeat Radahn in literal seconds. But just to show you the stats real quick, here they are, and as per all of the builds I'm going to show you, it is a level 150 character, and as you can see, we've got 50 points into vigor, 10 mind, 21 endurance, 30 strength, 15 dexterity, 10 intelligence, 33 faith, and then 60 arcane. Also, just to quickly point out, I did kind of forget that one of our talismans was going to give us a +5 boost to our dexterity, so I actually had 5 more points in dexterity. I probably didn't need, as you only need 15 to actually wield the weapon. With those 15 points in dexterity, you can actually drop that down to 10, and then maybe apply extra endurance or arcane or strength, depending on what you want to focus a little bit more into with this build, if this isn't quite fitting well for you. But with those 60 points in arcane, we will have 139 bleed proc with both of the gargoyle twin blades, and where we have seppuku on both of them, if we use that, we will get additional bleed proc per hit, as well as a +30 to our base AR. We also have 33 points in our faith stat, so we can also run things like Golden Vow and Howl of Shibiri to boost our damage output by 15 and 25% respectively. But then we're also running these certain talismans, and of course feel free to pause the video and jot these down if you need to, but essentially with this setup, like I say, Millicent's Prosthesis is going to give us a +5 to dexterity and can be combined with the Rotten Winged Insignia to give us 2 boosts of successive damage output. But then we've also got the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, because again, we're proccing bleed almost like every single second with this build. We will constantly have a +20% overall damage output buff. And then the Claw Talisman is also super important, because the main reason as to how we're doing so much damage is we are utilizing the unique jump attacks with dual wield twin blades, and of course are just trying to spam that as much as possible. So basically just press your jump button and your left-handed light attack whilst holding both of the twin blades out, and you will do this unique move. And for those of you that are keen-eyed, you've probably seen that we do have the Gravebird chest on as well, because much like the Black Feathers chest piece in the base game, this also gives you a +10% boost to your damage output whenever you're doing said jump attacks. And we are of course running the White Mask as well, to again give us another 10% boost to our damage output whenever a bleed proc occurs. And then we finalize the armor with the Rakshasa gauntlets and greaves to just give us a +4% boost to our overall damage output, which I know doesn't really sound like a lot, but everything counts against Radahn. And then just to finalize the build for damage output in the Wonder Physic, I highly recommend that you run both the Strength Knot tier and the Thorny Crack tier to again boost our overall damage output tremendously. So even when we're not proccing bleed, we're doing the thousands and thousands of damage that you're seeing me deal with those crazy jump attacks. So yes, if you're struggling, I highly recommend that you use this Winged Assassin build, and if you need a more in-depth look on how to get everything, there will be links in the description to our previous video where we went over everything in greater detail, so definitely check that out. But if you're looking in the description, there might be one other link that might have caught your eye, and that is because yes, today's video is sponsored once again by Instant Gaming. Instant Gaming is one of the leading providers for CD keys for your favorite games and DLC packages, and where everything is dealt with in digital codes, they're saving you money as they don't have to pay for any shipping. All of these codes are also obtained directly from the publishers themselves, so not only are they saving you a bunch of money, but they're extremely reliable and the service to get these codes is extremely quick. So if you're looking for a brand new place to purchase your games, definitely check out Instant Gaming, and you can head over there by using the link that's in my description. And again, just to be abundantly clear, if you do purchase anything after using my link, you will be financially helping out the channel. So thank you again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring today's video, but let's get back into the video because we've still got 2 more crazy builds to show you. And just like that previous build, this one is also an extreme meta because it revolves around the Blood Fiend's arm. Yes, the chicken leg is back for another appearance. This weapon has now basically become the best strength weapon to exist in all of Elden Ring, because not only is it so powerful with its stance damage and base damage, but when you change the Ash of War and change the weapon into a blood affinity, you can actually get the bleed proc over 200. So yes, doing 200 points worth of bleed proc every time you hit your enemy. So of course, with the Blood Fiend arm, I highly recommend that you put the Crag Blade Ash of War on it, as that will again boost your overall damage output by 15%, as well as giving you plus 10% to your overall stance damage with the weapon whenever you put Crag Blade on it. And like I say, change the weapon to a blood affinity so you can get that insane bleed proc on it, and then delve into these stats. And again, we've got 50 points worth of vigor, 10 mind, 25 endurance, 30 strength, 11 dexterity, 10 intelligence, 33 faith, and then 60 arcane. So it's actually very similar in terms of stat spread to the previous build, just essentially taking those points out of dexterity and putting them to endurance, because you do actually need 11 points of dexterity to actually wield the Blood Fiend's arm correctly. So essentially, if for whatever reason you're struggling to get the jump attacks off with the Gargoyle Twin Blades, this is basically going to be a much safer, or at least a much more consistent version of that build, and the footage you're seeing isn't even the full potential you can get out of it, because of course we're still running the same buffs of Golden Val and Hala Shibiri, but we're actually just running a regular armor set. I believe I had the Raging Wolf armor set on at the time, so I'm not actually getting any passive buffs at all from the armor set, because I just wanted to show off how good this weapon actually is. So if you wanted to, again, you can maybe take a little bit out of arcane and add a few more points to endurance to allow you to run the Rakshasa armor set, because don't forget, we are using a colossal weapon, so if I were to put that on with my current stats, I would actually be in a heavy roll rather than sticking in the medium weight class. But either way, whether you run Rakshasa's armor or not, here again are the talismans for this particular build. And of course, this time round we're focusing on charged heavy attacks, so things like the axe talisman is going to be extremely useful, as well as the brand new two-handed talisman, because again, we can two-hand this weapon and constantly have a plus 15% buff. But again, running the Lord of Blood's exaltation will be in our best interest. But then for your final talisman, I highly recommend that you run a stamina regen talisman like the double-headed turtle talisman, or just a single-head turtle talisman from the base game, because where we're focusing on charged heavy attacks, it is going to deplete our stamina very quickly. So the quicker we can get that regenerated, obviously the better. And again, to finalize this build, I highly recommend that you run the Stone Barb crack tier inside of your Wonder Physic, and once again pair that with the Strength Knot tier, because again, the beautiful thing of two-handing this weapon is you'll get a plus 50% in your strength stat whenever you two-hand it, meaning that where we originally had 30 points of strength and now have 40 with the Wonder Physic, we actually now are running about 60 strength in this build, meaning that we hit the first soft cap. So we're dealing a lot of damage, is basically what I'm trying to say, which of course allows us to again just destroy Radahn, break his stance super quickly, and then annihilate him again with the insane amount of bleed proc that this weapon does. And the best thing I forgot to mention is when you do a charge heavy, you actually deal an extra pool of blood, which again does more bleed proc, which is how we're doing that so quickly. But again, if you want a more in-depth look into this build, feel free to check out the video in the description. But now it's time to move on to the final build that will annihilate Radahn. And yes, for our third and final build, it is going to revolve around the shield and thrusting weapon meta, which not only allows you to poke your enemies behind said shield, but said shield will also negate pretty much every single bit of damage that your enemy has to throw at you. And yes, this does include Radahn. Now, this footage is actually going to be from NG+7 just to show the true powers of this build, because like I say, with the right setup, you're not going to be taking any damage at all, meaning that you can just sit with your LB or L1 button held so that you've got your shield up at all times, and then spam the absolute hell out of your light attack with your right hand weapon to again just tick away at Radahn's health. Now, the best shield to be using with this kind of build is going to be the fingerprint shield, and I'm just going to quickly show you where to get that, because for those of you that don't know, you do need to go through that sort of like secret passage towards the Three Fingers lair. And when you get down to the bottom with the last coffin that you need to basically jump down from to break the floor, instead of jumping down and breaking the floor, if you head into this area and then hang right down this corridor, at the end of it will be the fingerprint shield, and that is of course what we're going to be using, because when we pair that with things like Scholar's Shield and the talismans I'm going to show you in a moment, not only are you negating pretty much every bit of damage that Radahn has to throw at you, you also have an extremely high amount of guard boost, meaning you take hardly any stamina damage as well, which is how obviously you can just literally sit there holding your shield up and thrusting your weapon at Radahn in retaliation, making this one of the most brain dead but most useful builds to destroy literally any boss. And of course, to mimic exactly how we set this up, here are the stats for said build. So again, we've got 50 points into vigor, 10 mind, 40 endurance this time, along with 48 strength, 20 dexterity, 12 intelligence, 10 faith, and then 39 arcane. And the reason why we have those particular stats is because you need 48 strength to use the fingerprint shield, but then I also use the Antspear rapier as my weapon of choice to obviously poke Radahn with behind my shield, as not only can you change the affinity to a blood affinity with this weapon to of course deal bleed damage, which is the meta, but it also comes with a natural Scarlet Rot ability, which again will just tick away at Radahn's health bar every time we proc him with both. The amount of build up we do for Scarlet Rot does not change with the stats on this weapon, it will just remain at 50, but by having 39 arcane in this build, the bleed proc will actually reach 100. So again, every sort of like 6, 7 or 8 attacks with this particular weapon will proc a bleed on Radahn, and of course it will proc a lot earlier in the earlier new games. And we've got 20 dexterity as that's the minimum requirement for this weapon, and then of course just pumped everything that we can into endurance to allow us to basically use the shield poking abilities as long as possible, and then 12 intelligence is the minimum requirement to cast Scholar's Shield. But saying that, here are the talismans that we're running with this build. Of course, where we're relying on our shield, the Great Shield talisman will be our best friend, as that also helps deplete the amount of stamina damage that we take whenever Radahn hits us. But then actually on this character, because I haven't played the DLC properly on this character yet, I only had the single-headed turtle talisman, but of course feel free to use the double-headed turtle talisman if you've got it, as of course that will help with our stamina regen whenever we need to regenerate our stamina. But then I was also using the Pearl Shield talisman to help us with the second phase, because of course all of those rays of light do have an AoE effect, and where it's non-physical damage, again we just won't take as much damage whilst running this particular talisman as long as we're guarding. But then I was also running the Arsenal Jar talisman, because again, as you can see with our armor set, it isn't the most fashionable, but it does give some of the best resistances to Radahn's fight, as we're using basically the Tree Sentinel armor. But again, to remain in a medium weight gain, I did actually just chuck on the Nomadic's helmet, just because why not, I guess. But of course, if you're skilled enough or you're brave enough, you can run other armor sets or run no armor at all, because as long as you've got the shield up, you would be taking very minimal damage, if no damage at all. I just wanted the best protection to make this some sort of like tanky build in case for whatever reason my stamina was fully depleted and therefore I was open to a hit, or again if I got caught in one of the rays of light and wasn't guarding at the right times, etc. That's why I had the armor set on that I did. So if you want sort of like the best protection from everything, feel free to also copy the armor set, but as I say, pretty much anything will do as long as you're holding your shield up. And in the Wonder Physic, I was running the Green Burst Crystal tier along with the Upper Line Hard tier, just again to help me with damage negation, like I just mentioned a moment ago. But more importantly, the Green Burst Crystal tier will help with our stamina regeneration, which of course is the most important thing about this build. And even when the spell on the shield wears off, the shield is still more than capable of protecting you quite substantially. And like I say, this is just an L1 or LB holding merchant build, whilst tapping R1 or RB every so often and just relying on those bleed procs and the Scarlet Rot procs to just tick away at Radahn's damage. And it's not the most fun build in the world, but it's definitely the most efficient and the most practical, because literally anybody, including my nan, could use this build to defeat Radahn. And well, that just goes to show how easy Radahn's fight can actually be as long as you've got the right builds. And I know a lot of you have been asking me to cover Radahn's fight, so so I thought I would do it in this video using the best builds from the latest update. So yeah, if you are struggling with Radahn, now you don't have to, and all I want to ask in return is that if you enjoyed this video and enjoyed these builds, definitely make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you want to stay up to date with even more Elden Ring content, then make sure you subscribe to the channel too, as that way you won't miss out on a future video. But go have fun defeating Radahn and making him look like an absolute fool, and I guess for now I will catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.